time is it? I thought this meeting started 5 minutes ago. I'm just going to call Elliot. Hey, Elliot? I'm in the Zoom meeting. I thought it started 5 minutes ago. What's going on? Oh, shit. It's a Microsoft Teams meeting? I'm in the wrong place. I got to go.
This is the regular meeting of the Town of Clinton Environmental Commission. Our meetings are open to the public, and our meeting schedule is posted on the Town of Clinton website and in the Observer Tribune newspaper.
So the way we should do this for the winter gathering is we'll just act as if this is
hang on 1 second. Let me just mute.
All right.
Hey, babe. Yeah, I'm in this terrible meeting with these jerks. Definitely should have been an email.
Juniper, you're not muted.
Juniper!
So what do you think, Julia?
We can't, Julia, you have to unmute, please.
You're muted. No, we still can't hear you.
Nope.
Have you tried to click the button that says mute? You see the little speaker?
Can you hear me now?
Yay!
Hello and welcome to another episode of ERG Powertalk. I'm your host, Joe Santana. That clip you just heard is from a funny set of sketches of all too familiar, cringeworthy Zoom experiences done by a group of people from ANJEC back in February 2021. So why is this still funny 3 years later? Because it still happens quite often, actually. But despite all the glitches and people's slowness to adapt to this new world, remote work is clearly here to stay as a part of our workplace. And in this rapidly evolving remote work era, employee resource groups must embrace some of the new challenges and leverage the emerging opportunities presented by this growing trend. So, are those challenges and opportunities, and what are some practical strategies and actionable tips to help ERG leaders develop new solutions for their communities in this evolving remote-first world? That and more are the topics of our discussion today, and to help us answer these questions, we've got the perfect guest. But before we introduce our guests, let's take a moment to review our mission and acknowledge our supporters. This is ERG Power Talk, and I'm your host, Joe Santana. The purpose of ERG Power Talk is to provide a virtual forum for the exchange of great ideas and inspiration for ERG leaders, as well as others interested in supporting ERGs. With ERG Power Talk, there is no more waiting until the next conference and praying that you get the budget to travel to the conference to find great ideas and stimulation toward action. Just subscribe and listen at your convenience. Before we begin, a quick note of thanks to our supporters: Atrium Health, Freighter Health and Wisconsin Medical College, Hiscox, Lee Health, National Audubon Society, Tapestry, Oshkosh Corporation, UL Solutions, and Sony Pictures Entertainment. Now, let's go straight to the program. He is a C-suite leader and productivity consultant specializing in future of work strategies and operational excellence with a diverse background spanning technology, education, and consulting sectors. He has led process improvement initiatives for Fortune 100 clients, enhancing productivity and achieving faster results. As the best-selling co-author of The Power of Remote and a recognized thought leader, he speaks on productivity and employee engagement in hybrid work environments. His roles include senior executive positions at Vertera, TVon, Minga, FreshGrade, and the Walt Disney Company, where he revitalized processes, managed cross-functional teams, and developed high-tech solutions. He holds a degree in computer information systems from the University of British Columbia.
Shane Spraggs, thanks for having me. That's a very generous opening. It tells you a lot about who I am already, but I'm a productivity consultant for Vertera right now, and I am also a public speaker, and I'm making the rounds to introduce people to the power of remote and have some really productive conversations around remote work, because I think it's still very relevant and continuing to pick up steam.
Shane, thank you for being on ERG Power Talk. So really a big topic. We're going to try to boil it down to a couple of questions, but I think that this is a topic that can probably go on for much longer. Let's start by you telling us a little bit about what you do and what gave you that deep expertise that you now have in this remote workspace.
Well, like most people, I spent the last 4 years working remotely. In 2020, I took a job with Vertira. Vertira is owned by Cynthia Watson, who's the co-author of the book, and she's been working remotely for 15, 20 years, all her whole career. And so she had a lot of practical experience from an individual contributor or project management standpoint. And she was eager to bring someone like myself on who had a lot of experience leading teams and management to try to fill out the other part of the story. And so I quickly, it's always been an interest to me in terms of how people work and how to get the most out of people and how to do so in a way that gives them the best work-life balance. And remote work just really spoke to me. I really got into learning about it, and we put the book out, started working on it in 2021, and got it published in 2023. Probably the worst timed launch in history, because that was the time, February last year, where people started doing the remote return to office mandates. But that fortunately turned around, and in October of last year, people started looking at hybrid options, and people were really pushing back on the return to office.
Yeah, they are indeed. So what forces, Shane, do you see continue to support remote work now that the COVID pandemic is pretty much something of the past?
Well, I think the pandemic gave us a unique opportunity to, first of all, prove to employers that it was possible. I like to say that when the pandemic happened, the employees were relatively ready. They mostly just picked up their laptops and went and did the same work they had and worked from home. What it really highlighted was the need for better training for leaders, managers, and HR people to learn how to work remotely. But along with that, it also gave us a new sense of work-life balance and well-being. People started to realize that, hey, I'm spending, on average, an hour and a half in a car each day traveling or commuting to my work. I'm spending probably on average $55 a day on gas, on food and other things like, additional clothing. And all the while you're missing out on key moments with your children, opportunities to, expand a hobby, maybe chances to hang out with friends. And people started to question, why are we doing this to ourselves? And so I'm not suggesting that you shouldn't work. I'm suggesting that there should be a good balance between work and life. And remote work provides that to you, whether that's the opportunity to pick up your kid from school at 3 p.m. every day, or you work your day and you have your evenings clear, or maybe you're a night owl and you want to start your work after 8 o'clock and you want to work in a different time zone. All that makes it's far more possible. And then from a business standpoint, there are lots of values from a business to save money, recruit elsewhere, and the list goes on. I could obviously list a bunch of things here, which I think we're going to get into.
I think you're absolutely right. People just simply realize how much time they were spending doing things to get to work, to go to a place, to do the actual work, and then to come back home again. And that was a filler because they weren't doing anything productive at that time. They were just going from point A to point B and settling in. And in the meantime, they were missing on various quality areas of their own life. But the other thing that you said that I thought was really interesting, and I think you've mentioned this before when we talked a while back, is that it doesn't sound like employees had any big learning curve to learn how to work from home. As you've put it, the learning curve was all in the organizations, managers, leaders, human resources, and other groups like that, who essentially have a model that's set up around the idea that there is this place where everybody comes and this is where they do their work and this is how they manage them and so forth. Have you seen any progress in terms of leaders and people in the HR space getting past that self-imposed limitation that makes it hard for them to manage a remote distributed workforce?
Yeah, absolutely. People are starting to learn. However, we have to remember that managers were poorly trained before the pandemic. It was we all knew this, the saying, you take a good employee and make them a bad manager. That's been around for years, because what do we tend to do? It's like, hey, you're doing great at your job, now manage people. And we missed the point that these individuals have to learn a whole new skill that maybe they're not qualified to learn. It's a different kind of part of the brain. You have to you have to have emotional intelligence. You have to be able to care for people. And that doesn't change when you do it remotely. In fact, it gets worse because you can't see people all the time. You have to, it takes different skills. But remote doesn't need different management. It just needs good management. So all the skills that are, all the blogs and all the books that are out there on how to be a good manager are still relevant, because you need to be able to establish people's, delegate work to people, motivate them, mentor them, coach them, get and follow up on their work and keep them accountable, whether you're in the office or not. So what I'm hoping, and largely from a business standpoint, businesses will start taking more responsibility for training their staff. But and this is a future question as well. But what we're seeing is that future businesses are going to start remote first, because it makes very little sense for someone who's in an entrepreneurial role to spend money on an office when they can do it from home for a little while and bootstrap. And I think we're going to see that the next Microsofts and next Amazons are being created into people's basements right now. In addition to that, people are getting more familiar with working with technology. My 14-year-old daughter, she's lived with technology her entire life. She has a different relationship with it. And so that's going to also impact how they work in the future.
Absolutely. As you were talking about that, you were taking me down memory lane, because before I transitioned into the career role that eventually got me to doing some of the things I do today, I was in the IT space. And I've been a writer for a number of years. One of my first books was on the topic of IT management and how we were promoting people who were excellent technologists, but just not only lack the skill, which can be taught, but they lack the inclination to want to be managers. There are some people that just don't want to manage people. They love the title. They love that big title, but they don't want to fill that particular role. They want to be the player. And so they end up having a team of people that are sitting in the sidelines while they're trying to do all the work, and using them to do the short order cooking while they're the master chef. Unfortunately, now that we need really quality managers, we seem to be lacking in those. And what we have are people that are used to doing things a certain way because they were able to get around some of their shortcomings as managers when they had people in the room that they can't seem to be able to do as effectively now that they don't have all the people in the room. So really fascinating when you think that what we're experiencing now has a lot to do with the work we didn't do in the past in terms of selecting the right people and developing the right people into those roles. So Shane, tell us about your book, The Power of Remote, and what it offers for employees of large organizations who work primarily or entirely remotely.
Well, yeah. So here's my prop. Here's the book here. Worked with Forbes on it. It was really well received. I'm pretty happy it hit the bestsellers mark at one point when it was first released. And the book isn't really aimed at employees, and it's aimed at those three categories of people I mentioned earlier. HR. So how do you hire and onboard people? How do you fire people? It's unfortunate that it happens, but people have to be it's a harder practice to go through to terminate somebody remotely. And leadership, how do you strategize? How do you manage your yearly plan? How do you stay in touch as a leader with your teams? But the bulk of the work is focused on the management team, because as you said, we don't have there's a few additional challenges as a manager. And we don't really put enough effort into teaching our managers or coaching them or mentoring them. And unfortunately, there's only so much you can learn at school. It's not really a textbook role. You have to learn by doing and often learn by failing. And you have to, businesses have to be prepared to invest in it. So my pitch to anyone who runs a remote company is, don't look at the fact that you're saving money from, not having to pay rent as a freebie. Take some of that money and set a budget aside specifically for management training. And managers need more than training. Again, training, you go somewhere to learn something. it's just a textbook. You get told the steps and the skills to take. It's the practicing that matters. And so we really encourage people to set up coaches or mentors with their managers so that they can have someone to talk to and someone who can reflect on the work they're doing. And it's also very, you have to learn things in stages that, some things are kind of circular. The things that, one thing might depend on another, and it won't make sense until you learn that thing. The book covers a lot of the management side. We also have a couple of chapters at the end for project management and for sales, two roles that are very popular in certainly diverse companies. And sales teams have always been remote in a respect, and project managers increasingly have to work with diverse teams.
So as we look forward, I love taking leaps into the future. That's one of my pet areas, is looking at the signals of where we're going so that we can prepare, because we're going to be there sooner than we think, right?
Yeah.
So as you look at the future, where do you see remote headed? Jump ahead, let's say 10 years, and then let's work our way back 5 years and maybe the next year. So 10 years ahead, what do you think remote work looks like?
I think it's going to be a huge increase in remote work over time. And the simple fact of that is that, like I said earlier, it makes no sense to an entrepreneur to start a business and open an office. Not only does that anchor you to a local area, but it's cost money, reduces your talent pool, and introduces a whole bunch of other challenges. And you miss out on this opportunity to hire from wherever. Even time zones can work in your best interest. So we're going to see a lot more companies start remotely, and therefore in 10 years time, a lot of these companies are going to be at that enterprise level, and they will be competing with the Microsofts and the Amazons, and we'll see a lot more remote opportunities for people. Similarly, along the same lines, this generation is really coming up working with computers, and there's this weird gap we're going through right now. Remote work is predominantly favored by people who are older and later on in their career. They've gone to the office, they've learned the skill of working at an office, because there's some skills there, how to interact with people, how to be a good employee. And they've maybe moved past the desire to form social groups at an office as well. And they're more comfortable sitting at home. So people 35 plus are the people right now we see who are more frequently, looking for remote work. In the future, this current generation is going to be graduating with a desire to work through computers at a stronger level than the current generation, the current employees. And that also is going to raise a bunch of challenges, because we need to teach them how to be good employees without them having necessarily the opportunity to have those encounters that require them to learn that skill. And so I think there's going to be a lot more emphasis on businesses to nurture their staff and invest in them for the future.
So how do you recommend building a three-dimensional culture in these remote workspaces? Because I think we're dealing with, there are people in one place, there are people that are remote, and then there are people that are in some mixed space. How do you recommend building that culture that's able to be the umbrella over those three dimensions?
Well, I think the first thing is for businesses to start realizing that culture is not social. It's such a misconception, and a lot of companies, certainly the ones in the office, they lean on social engagements, Jeans Friday, or Casual Work Fridays as their means of culture. And what they're really missing out on is they're not communicating the purpose of the business, the values of the business. And I think that from a remote work standpoint, you really have to hammer home on why the business is in business and bring people along for the ride who want to contribute to that purpose. The other thing is fostering a sense of belonging and inclusivity, making sure things are fair for people, being very clear around performance, advancement in the company, making sure that people understand how decisions are made, being very intentional around how the business is run. I mentioned it earlier, but there has to be more intentional mentorship and peer groups that have to be formed, and so that that people can learn from each other. If you just leave someone to work towards their own devices, unless they're very proactive, they will tend to gravitate towards siloing. And so the business has to take initiative of that and offer them more professional development opportunities, build engagement through recognition, and create some channels for feedback and innovation.
Okay, so here's what I got out of the first half of our discussion with Shane that you can apply to run your groups effectively in an increasingly remote world. 1, make sure you communicate a strong vision and focus for your group to help remote employees stay connected through a purpose and a feeling of alignment with goals that fosters a sense of belonging. 2, get adequately prepared for leading distributed groups. Pursue continuous coaching and mentoring to enhance leadership effectiveness in a remote environment. 3, encourage flexible participation that fit your members' personal and work lives. Accommodate different time zones. One way to do this is to have asynchronous meetings. 4, address isolation by creating mentorship and peer support subgroups. These structures help employees learn from one another, stay connected, and avoid the tendency to silo in remote settings. 5, clearly communicate how all group decisions are made. Transparency builds trust and helps remote workers feel involved in the overall direction of your group. And finally, 6, use digital tools to enhance recognition and feedback loops. Offering continuous recognition and establishing channels for employees to share ideas promotes engagement and drives innovation, even in a distributed environment. In the next segment of our discussion with Shane, we will explore some additional ways ERGs can support their increasingly remote group members, while in many cases helping their companies support a remote workforce. All this and more when we come back, but first this. I'll see you on the other side. Are you an ERG group or committee chair struggling to balance your ERG activities with your day job responsibilities? Well, you're not alone. There are hundreds of thousands of passionate ERG leads all around the world that find themselves in the same boat. The only solution found by many is to give up lunch hours and personal time with family and friends. But there is a better way, and that better way is to master the powerful skills that enable you to 1, set realistic and achievable compelling goals and priorities. 2, distribute the workload by effectively delegating tasks and responsibilities to others. 3, communicate in a way that increases your impact with less time and effort on your part. 4, secure the full and active support of executive sponsors and other senior business leaders. And 5, fit your ERG leadership work into a reasonable set of time boundaries. And that and more is exactly what tens of thousands of your colleagues have learned to do effortlessly by participating in Supercharge Workshops. Supercharge Workshops was developed by us along the same easy and powerful how-to framework found in our popular Supercharge Your ERGs book. The modular, customizable programs are loaded with fun exercises and tools that will immediately give you back hours of time each day while increasing your ability to achieve high impact and measurable results in both your ERG work and your job. For more details on how you can schedule a Supercharge Workshop session in your organization, go to superchargeworkshops.com. That's https:// Supercharge Workshops, one word with no spaces.com. So don't suffer silently. Take that first step towards stopping your struggle today. Check out Supercharge Workshops. So let's move in a slightly different direction now to a lot of the people that are listeners of this program, who are people who lead communities within organizations or these networks, either a women's network or an African-American network or veterans, Asian, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. How can these corporate communities help remote workers as well as their organizations? How can they become part of what a CEO that I had on the program a while ago called their life raft? because they no longer have those encounters at the water cooler. So like, how can they help? How can they take that community that they have, that they've built, which usually met in the conference room, and now extend it? Not just having speakers come on and the mechanics of sharing information, but give it that warmth or that touch that you feel when a bunch of people get together and share a pizza and a coffee.
Right. And the first thing I'll just quickly explain my perspective on relationships in an office, and I'm a big proponent on the concept of relatedness versus friendships. And in a remote, I won't spend the entire time going through it all, but it's based on some work done by a couple of gentlemen, Richard Ryan and Edward Deci out of the 80s, on the self-determination theory. But they propose that you need to have people need a sense of relatedness to each other, and so these communities, these groups provide that to individuals inside a larger business, larger organization. And another report came out not too long ago that stated that the relationships we form virtually can be equally as strong as the ones we have in person. And they had a great line, brains that fire together, wire together. And we see this all the time in pop culture. With you, I'm sure you've seen, on either Instagram or TikTok, friends who've been playing, online games for years but never met in person are getting together for the first time, and they're hugging each other. They know each other inside out because they've been playing the same game together. That's what these communities offer. Not necessarily that they're games, but they provide a common area for people to work together and have relationships and form relatedness apart from just the work that they're doing, and they can be very critical inside a large organization.
So I would imagine, Shane, that you're a proponent of something I've seen some groups do, which is that rather than just calling everybody together when they have a particular speaker that they're going to have talk about a particular topic, they also bring people together for what they call virtual coffees or just quick exchanges, get-togethers. These things, they seem fluffy on the surface, but I guess you would agree that they do provide an essential connection because we're human and we need that human connection.
Yeah, it's perfectly reasonable to have activities that form relatedness or relationships at work. I do offer a couple of important bits of advice. The first is make sure your meetings, your gatherings are facilitated by either a person or a computer. If let's say you put 10 people on a call together and there's no topic, we're just there to talk. The typical response to that for people will be that they'll wait for someone else to say something. And you may have a couple of extroverts on the call who might do the conversation, and they'll just take off and they'll go off on some tangent and they will do all the talking. Meanwhile, within about 5 minutes, these other, maybe a little more introverted individuals will be off surfing the web or on their devices. And it just won't result in what you wanted to do, what you hope for. If you can get a good facilitator, maybe even have a activity around some sort of game or topic or conversation, they can do a better job of making sure that everyone gets their voice, everyone has a chance to share what they had in their mind, and everyone gets the same amount of time as if they want it. And I find that's very important. One of the tools I use for that is called a retrospective. Again, I won't get into the details in the interest of time, but look up what a retrospective is. The software industry has been doing them for years, and they're a very valuable form of meeting, especially remote. The other one I would share is that do more icebreakers. Now, again, you're right; they do feel a little bit frothy and a little bit fluffy, but if you have a maybe not every single one, but if you have an hour-long meeting each week or even a team meeting each week, start with an icebreaker. It could be something as simple as tell me a smell you remember from your childhood. And when people go around the room and provide that their experiences, that starts to form a sense of relatedness. Oh yeah, I remember that smell as well. I remember being a child as well, and that helps the relationships. And even better if you can get a few chuckles out of it. So again, the brains that fire together, wire together. And I think that's a really important takeaway here.
Simple but powerful. So what other skills and tools do you think community leaders need to support increasingly remote workplaces? It sounds like you've already outlined a few. One is becoming more effective with things like icebreakers, becoming more effective in setting up discussions, even if it's for a short time, that have some kind of topic that is humanistic. So those are really some good ones. What are some others that, let's say, for example, if I'm leading a community of women or Hispanics or African Americans, and I want them to feel that firing together, that connection, what are some other things that you suggest, Shane?
Right. And I think the top one on my list is emotional intelligence. It's unfortunate that maybe they do teach this in some schools, but I didn't learn this word until much later in my career. And it's essentially being able to be empathetic towards others and understand their situation and listen to them. And building on that, active listening is also a significantly important skill as well. Did I hear what you're saying? Especially in today's communication, it's easy to misconstrue something, easy to miss something, and by saying something back into someone else, in your own words, they can have a sense that they were heard and that you understand them. I also alluded to this earlier, but I wish they would teach facilitation somewhere along the line. There needs to be a practical how to be a manager course somewhere, and facilitation and moderation is right up there as important skills to learn if you're going to lead people, because obviously you want to get the most of them and you want to make sure everyone's involved. And quite often the best ideas come from those quiet people who aren't raising their hands. The next are pretty straightforward. You want to have some good time management skills. You want to be able to be adaptable, have problem solving skills. Conflict resolution never gets old. You're maybe less I find there's less conflict remotely, but it's still important to be able to work through it. And good old project management helps a lot, being able to delegate and assign work and follow up on people with work and have good conversations about their priorities and when they think things should get done, and assign accountability, not really responsibility.
What are some resources that you offer, that you and your organization offer? Maybe beyond that, books. You mentioned a couple of things earlier that maybe you can expand a little bit on now, but what are those resources?
Sure. Yeah, and I offer a whole bevy of options. A couple of the key ones, for me, if you reach out to me, I'm happy to share with you our communication template. Communication planning, to me, is one of the most vital things you can do as a baseline with a team. So many people have a different perspective on what digital communication is, and they don't quite understand the nuance of asynchronous communication. And by getting together as a team and establishing a plan for how people want to work when they want to work, it can create an environment for a team to be successful. The other one is onboarding. I have a lot of whole plan for establishing an onboarding plan. And onboarding is critical to establishing that relationship with an individual when they first join. And a lot of companies just don't do it well, and they not only affect the first few days of someone's work there, but they also impact others that have to work with that individual. I've got a mini book that talks about how to plan remote work. How to plan your year virtually. So if you have a very diverse group of leaders in your team who can't get together in person, but you need to get together and do some strategic planning, I've got a whole plan for that. And from a book standpoint, I like the classics. I'm really big on things like the lean startup. The lean startup has some really good concepts for running your business, and those filter into running teams as well. What little things can you do to prove that this is working? And so whenever I work on change management within a team, I will take a lean approach. Let's try this. See how, let's do something small, see if it works. And then, if it doesn't work, we'll fix it. So lean startup, a big believer in traction as well. Traction's got a really good format for running a business. Again, as I said, remote work doesn't need different management. It just needs good management, and Traction's got a great list of things there. So there you go. I could go on, but there's a few quick ones for you.
That's a pretty good list. One of the things I was thinking about as you were talking about this is I make use of asynchronous communication using video a lot. I shared one of those videos with you in preparation for this discussion. And what I find is that even though I can write this information down, even though I can put it on a page or maybe on a brief email, there is something about communicating something orally and people being able to see you and being able to read your gestures as well as your tone, in addition to the words, that adds a layer to the communication that you just can't get any other way. So when it comes to asynchronous communication, I know that the easiest form of asynchronous communication is write an email or send a note. But I think it's a two-dimensional or flat form of communication. Once you use a video, it becomes a fuller form of communication. So that's my pet belief. Don't know what your experience has been, but I think you can do a lot of outreach and do a lot of that connection more effectively by using video as opposed to just using a written email or a written note.
Yeah, I'm on that bandwagon as well. I'm really in favor and excited by this new trend of sending voice memos or video memos. You're completely right. When I write a text message, I write it, or an email, I write it in my voice, but they read it in their voice, and it's incredible how different it can be when even if you're just shouting pure facts, it can come off as dry and maybe sinister in some respects. And the worst is a lot of people try to inject a little bit of humor and a little bit of sarcasm, and that really comes off poorly in a text message. So the ability to send over a quick message, either by voice or by video, removes all that. Pictures, are worth 1,000 words, and certainly if you're trying to help people with an application, you can film yourself using it. It becomes a resource later on. And I think a lot of meetings can be reduced by, a quick few voice memos. And on that note, I should have mentioned as well, one of the things we have at Vertira is we did a bunch of research on meetings that is very valuable that you should look up. But so I think this is going to be another trend happening in the future, because this generation is very comfortable with TikTok, right? And comfortable with putting their phone in front of their face and doing a 2 to 3 minute spiel and then sending it to somebody. Whereas my generation, it's a lot easier to hide behind an email and just think about it for a few minutes and maybe too long, and then get out the perfect version of it, even though it doesn't always work that way.
That was very insightful. When you write someone, you write in your voice, in your head, you're hearing yourself with the tone, the pitch, the feeling that you want that message to have. But when they read it with their own filter, and that filter provides a tone and a pitch that may be slightly different depending on maybe who they believe you are and their own personal dynamics. So again, using video makes it much easier to convey the full message that you want to convey. So I wanted to make sure I underlined that, because I think that was really an important insight. So Shane, wrapping up, last question I've got for you is, how can our listeners reach you?
Well, there's one really easy way. There's only one Shane Spraggs on LinkedIn, and I'm fortunate for that, because if you search for my name, you will find me. And that's probably the best way right now. You can obviously find my book on Amazon or through Forbes, and that will link you to my LinkedIn, and I'm happy to chat with anybody and talk to them. I should have mentioned as well, I do public speaking as well. So I got a presentation next week with the Fortune 50 where I'm opening up their Pro D Day with some information and some knowledge that they can talk about for the rest of the day. So I love doing that for people, and it's just something I enjoy doing, is helping others learn and think about things in different ways.
Fantastic. Well, you've done a great job of doing that today as well, Shane. And I want to thank you again for being on ERG Power Talk today.
Thanks so much, Joe.
Okay, so here are some ideas I got out of the second half of our discussion with Shane on what ERGs can do. 1, ERGs can host regular virtual coffee breaks, social hours, or informal check-ins to recreate the connection lost in physical office spaces. This helps remote employees feel more connected to their peers and reduces isolation. 2, ERGs can provide training on emotional intelligence and active listening to foster better communication and empathy among remote workers. This helps create a supportive and understanding remote environment. 3, ERGs can host virtual gatherings with structured agendas or facilitated discussions to ensure balanced participation. This avoids the dominance of extroverted individuals and ensures all voices are heard. 4, encouraging the use of asynchronous video messages rather than just emails can help convey tone, emotion, and body language, making communication more personal and effective for remote workers. 5, starting meetings with simple icebreakers. ERGs can build relatedness among remote employees by encouraging meaningful sharing and connection. And finally, 6, ERGs can assist in designing and delivering onboarding programs that help remote employees feel welcomed and integrated into the company's culture with ongoing support through mentorship and community building activities. The key things to remember about creating a strongly bonded workforce with remote employees, as with employees who are in the same building, is found in Shane's saying, "Brains that fire together, wire together." In the context of relationships and teamworks, this highlights how shared experiences or activities, whether in person or virtual, strengthen social bonds and create a sense of connectedness. The more people interact, collaborate, and engage with one another at a human level, the stronger their relationships become. Much like neurons that repeatedly fire together form stronger connections in the brain. In essence, to support their organization's new remote workforce, ERG leaders need to help create regular, meaningful, shared experiences and opportunities for engagement, both virtually and in person, to strengthen those social bonds and that sense of connection among remote employees, ensuring a cohesive and supportive workforce. Do that, and you will be contributing greatly to creating the support platform you and your organization need for today and tomorrow's workforce. Thank you for tuning in to ERG Power Talk. If you enjoyed and got value out of this program, please like us and leave a favorable review at your podcast provider's site. Also, invite others to listen to the show. By the way, contact me if you're looking for an ERG Symposium keynote or a leader for your strategy workshop, new chair onboarding, and or ERG bootcamp. I can run these for you either in person or in a virtual setting. Also, for more great ideas and tips for your ERGs, get my books, Supercharge Your ERGs, 18 Tips to Power Up Your ERG/BRG Strategy, and the new DEI and ERG Frontier, how you and your efforts can rise and thrive in the new world of constant disruption. Both available on Amazon.com. I'm Joe Santana. Thanks again for tuning in.